Welcome to this episode of Interfere. I'm here with a good friend of mine, Shirin Faladi Roof, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist. And she also has some specialties that she deals with, and I'm going to let her tell you about that.
Thank you. The specialties. Well, I've worked with trauma and addictive disorders for many years. Probably 18 years, not as a therapist, but in treatment, in direct contact.
So, frontline stuff.
Yes. Crisis interventions, some family work, but more so with severe mental health issues, a lot of trauma, informed care. I'm the person, and I've been told this so many times in my career, I'm the person you go to when everything else has failed.
I believe it. I believe it.
And I have my own experience, personal experience with treatment and recovery and really overcoming a lot of adversity, which I think makes me more effective in terms of the work that I do, because I relate so much. And I have had to overcome and do some really art-staking work, which I think people can tell immediately if you really have, if your experience is not something that you've learned, but more so that you have walked through it yourself and have made it to the other side. So a lot of trauma-based and personality disorders, with young adults, mostly, 18 to, not that age matters, but young adults, basically.
Different modalities also?
Different modalities, primarily, I do EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's an amazing tool, and it's been proven to be extremely effective with treating trauma. And it's not long term, which I think that's what people like. It's that it's, more contained within a few, 6 to 10 sessions. And so that piece is important. And a lot of DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, and that's popular with treating borderline personality disorders. But really, I don't stay with one modality. I just kind of tap into all kinds of different areas, depending on what I deem as necessary.
Well, that's one of the things that I really admire about you, because I've watched you work, and you have an ability to be present, but also to hover over the conversation and see the most minute signs and signals. Mm-hmm. You have a very good talent of being present and showing your humanity, but also being a clinician at the same time and looking for those signals and then processing all that in real time to be able to regurgitate what is needed in the moment. Mm-hmm. That's something that can be worked on, but it's a gift.
That's well said. I don't know that I would have ever been able to articulate it. I feel like I should write that down.
Well, it's recorded. You don't need to write it down. But I observe. I'm an observer, and I'm in the work that I do. I'm very detail oriented, and you have that same type.
You must be.
Yeah, you're a fanatic in what you do. Maybe you don't realize it, but you're very surgical in your methodology of diagnosing, dissecting, and putting back together. And the person doesn't even know it's happening.
Yes.
That's what makes you who you are.
Thank you. That's very accurate.
Yes. Thank you. Cut. I'll be in my trailer. I'm done.
And, every therapist kind of has their area that they focus on. For me, it's trauma-based and borderline. I don't know why, I just love my borderline personality disorders. So a lot of personality disorders, but especially borderline, because that's the toughest one to treat. In fact, a lot of therapists would specify that if you've been diagnosed as a borderline, I don't work with borderlines.
Tell us about borderline disorders. Tell us what it is.
It's the borderline. There's a spectrum, right? But it's the one. It's the kid that's the most troubled. Like, you have, for instance, at your facility or any facility, it's the one that is resistant the most. It's the one that after you meet with them, you just feel like you need a nap. they're constantly resisting everything and any possible form of solution.
Why is that?
Well, I think with most borderlines have sexual abuse, childhood sexual abuse. I don't think there's ever been a borderline that I've worked with, and there could be some, I don't know, but in my experience, almost always there's childhood sexual abuse. And so that violating, with females, I mean,
Is it prevalent in males too?
not really. I mean, I've met maybe 2 borderline males in the past 15 years,
Mostly women.
It's primarily women.
Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. And
Yeah.
what are some of the characteristics of having borderline?
So borderline females would be extremely promiscuous, acting out sexually. There's a lot of extremes. So we're either in love or we're absolute best friends, or we hate each other deeply and want to have nothing to do with each other. So a lot of extremes. Very little to no self-awareness at all. So, sometimes you can point out something and you go, you know what, I guess maybe that was, I shouldn't have said that, or I shouldn't have said it that way. With a borderline, that doesn't exist. There's no real way of recognizing that I was at fault, or that maybe I played a role, or anything like that. So no self-awareness.
Is there medication that can help with
Yeah,
that?
of course.
What
There's
kind of
certain
medication?
meds. So SSRIs are, good for the depressive part of it, because they're either high or low.
So there is depression attached
Of
to
course. I
okay.
think depression is underlying fear that just shows up as depression or anxiety, but it's ultimately fear. And then it forms into different types of personality, sort of like OCD is one and narcissism is one. It just kind of takes different directions. But with borderline, they're just more outward, right? There's no real containing it, or at least even making it look okay.
But they're very sensitive to anything coming at them.
Extremely sensitive.
But not sensitive at all when they're spewing stuff out at the
No.
world.
No, there's a certain arrogance and entitlement. Even with trauma, it's like you can't tell me anything because I've endured this and that and the other. So there's no real understanding that maybe other people have also gone through difficult things. For the borderline, my case is far worse than anything you'd ever understand. I've suffered more than anyone, right? I'm more damaged. A lot of extremes.
That sounds like most newcomers that I hear at meetings.
That's so true.
Because there's 2 things that almost all newcomers have in common, and this is what they think makes them different, is that I'm different and you're not going to understand. And what's interesting about those 2 things is those 2 things are what makes us all the same, because we all felt that way when we first came in, right? So I think it's interesting. Do you find that a lot of addicts have, and on this show, just for people watching, when I say addicts, that includes alcoholics, because you can physically be addicted to alcohol.
Yeah.
And so to me, alcohol is just another drug. So if you hear me say addict, it includes the alcoholic. So do you think that most addicts have that characteristic in them?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think a lot of addicts have borderline. It's the pain that they're experiencing, they treat with drugs and alcohol, or sex addiction, or shopping, or process addiction. In our case, primarily substance abuse, right? So the borderline, I don't diagnose anyone within at least a year or 2, because you don't even really, like you said, it all resembles some form of mental illness, because they're so all over the place that it wouldn't be accurate to try and diagnose anybody until life is kind of stable, relationships are stable, finances are okay. Then you can really see if there's underlying mental health issues.
God,
and
it's
then
a lot of
diagnose.
work to get them there, though.
Yeah, a lot.
A lot of work to get them there, and most of the work they have to do on their own. You can guide them and give them the information based on your education, your experience, but you can't do the work for them.
Yeah.
So what do I do as a parent? I'm a parent of, let's say, a young lady who's got borderline disorders and is trying to treat it with substances, whether it be liquid form or any other, substances, and they get addicted to it. Now we got ourselves a real pickle here. And as a parent, knowing that my child has a mental condition, on top of it has a substance abuse issue, and as a parent, how do I know when I'm helping and when I'm harming? It's a tough thing for parents to try to navigate. Not to mention, while all this is happening, the parent also has to have some type of self-awareness to manage their own emotions and feelings. So we're asking a monumental task from these parents to not only be able to see what their kids are doing and who they are, how to respond to it, but also manage their own feelings and emotions that they're going through. And some of these parents themselves have issues that they're dealing with. So this is why when I do the work that I do, I work with the entire family.
Right.
As you well know, I'm a private recovery coach and a life coach. And when I get called on a job, when I go meet with the family, if the parents and the client are not both on board to make some heavy duty changes, then I don't even proceed. I can't, because there's just no point to it.
Right.
There's no point to it whatsoever. And I remembered the point that I was going to make. You were talking earlier about, because I think you brought up an excellent point about there being two types of self-centered people. One type is the very common type, the boastful type.
Yeah.
The one who's always bragging about how good he or she is. And that is easy to identify, not only for the general public to see, but it's pretty easy to get that person to see that too. But the more sinister type of self-centeredness is the one that you talked about. It's the person who doesn't think much of themselves, but that's all they ever think about.
Right.
That's a tough one to point out to people. Because anytime people have a lower opinion of themselves, they automatically assume that can't possibly be self-centeredness. And it can't.
It can, especially, when you devote your whole life to so-called helping others. Especially with parents of addicts and alcoholics or mentally ill individuals, you really just decide that everything can wait, and I am going to show up for the family, and I'm going to do whatever it takes. But then you're abandoning yourself or the other siblings or your relationship, and
or your childhood.
Yes.
Or your childhood, which I think you and I touched on this a long time ago, very briefly. And I got to tell you something. This particular topic that I'm about to bring up doesn't get talked about enough. And I think it might be because it's not happening as much, but there's a term out there. It's called parentification. It's when the roles are reversed.
Right.
And I personally experienced that on an extremely deep level. And from my understanding, there's two types of parentification. There's emotional, and then there's financial.
Right.
So, and for people watching, parentification is basically when a parent or parents begin to divulge too much of their adult lives with their children. The children become their confidants. They talk about their sexual history, their financial difficulties, just no boundaries whatsoever.
Right.
And in severe cases like mine personally, I became the main breadwinner in my household at 13 years old.
Wow.
And that type of pressure absolutely destroyed me. Absolutely destroyed me. And it has gigantic consequences in the child that's been parentified. In their adult lives, there are gigantic consequences. not being able to experience real intimacy, not trusting, feeling like you live on an island. And so, speaking for myself, I never, ever, ever liked drugs and alcohol because as a child, I saw what it did to my father. I saw how it affected my mother. I saw what it was doing to my brother and I despised it. But I had to earn a living to pay the rent, to
Right.
pay for the utilities, the food, and I was always under constant pressure. And there was nowhere to go. There was no one to talk to. There was not one stable adult in my life that could have came up and said, "Hey, I see you." And so what happened was that my world just started to cave in and it became smaller and smaller and lonelier and lonelier. And then some other traumatic stuff, abusive stuff happened to me and that just buckled me, completely buckled me. And at that buckled level, I drank a beer for the first time and it was like, oh my God, where have you been? Where the hell have you been all my life? It was the first time that I took a peaceful exhale, man, and I was home, and I was home, and so it's been a long, long, long road, many, 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 many mistakes, and they were just done to survive. I can honestly say most of the mistakes that I've made in my life, I was just trying to take the next breath. There was no other vine to grab onto, to swing,
Right.
to at least keep moving. And most of the time I knew it, but there were no options. There was nowhere to go. And so it was real, it was raw, it was in my face, and I did what I needed to do just to keep on keeping on. Now, it's funny because I feel like there aren't too many people that had it as rough as I had it, and we were just talking about that. But the truth is that it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter who had it worse. Nobody's handing out prizes.
Yeah.
What's worse for one person might be a cakewalk for another.
Right.
So it's all relative. What's important is that we get the help.
Yeah.
And the first help we need is not me seeking help from my dad, who's since passed away, or my mom. It's me getting help, which brings us back to your original point that do the therapy for you.
Yes.
You're not saying that other people didn't have a part in what happened, but we don't have control over what other people do.
Right.
We barely have control over what we do. When I came into therapy, and Shirin was wonderful enough to, have a couple of unofficial therapeutic sessions with me. We just kind of talked, and she was, very instrumental in helping me see a couple of things that I needed to see, because it's difficult for self to see self.
Yes.
Extremely difficult. Extremely difficult. And so I really appreciate what you bring to the table. I appreciate your style because you're very upfront and you lean a little bit more on pushing the client as you do, other than, like laying back. What takes most therapists, 9 months to say, you say it in the first month.
Yes.
And it's important because if that frightens people, then they're not ready. Because change is not easy.
Right.
You have to get uncomfortable to change.
It's a requirement.
There's no way around it.
Right.
And the reason I say that is because wherever you are in your life, whatever trap that you're stuck in, that trap is also your comfort zone. It has become your cocoon. Now, your cocoon is simultaneously what hurts you, but also what brings you peace. And so in order to get something different than what you're experiencing, you have to break out of the cocoon. And that's what we call uncomfortable.
Right.
So what are some of the ways that you help clients do that?
Well, going back to the parentified child,
Please.
for instance, because that's so important. And I think anyone who seeks therapy on some level has been in that position, be it the teenager, adolescent, young adult, or even the parents. You know, you had to show up in a way that was beyond your capacity. And that sort of is what sets the ball rolling when it comes to trauma, because you don't have, the brain hasn't developed the ability yet biologically, when you're 10, 11, to deal with mom being passed out on the couch and you having to make the lunch of your 4 or 5 year old sibling and making sure that they get to school.
And answer the door when the landlord wants to check.
Yeah.
It's humongous.
Yes.
It's humongous. And it will put you on an island. You will feel like you're alone on a planet with 8 billion people walking around.
And but the sad thing is, you don't realize because you're a child that, what, this is BS. Like, I shouldn't have to be doing this. I mean, I'll do it, but this is not right. As a 10, 11-year-old, that becomes your new reality. And you take on that weight of, I better figure out how to do this. And if I don't, then I'm at fault. If I can't meet the rent or if I can't keep it together, then I failed. And that I'm somehow not good enough. So you really take that on, and it's a responsibility that just is extremely defeating, is that like you talked about, having to take all that on as a teenager. And so it really sets the narrative up for the rest of your life, where everything becomes like, I have to show up in this way. Self-sufficiency is, a good trait, but it also takes a lot of pain, especially with people in recovery. There's a lot of self-sufficiency. They have the hardest time to ask for help or to reach out or to even, talk about needing help.
But they'll do anything for everybody else.
Yes.
Yeah.
They show up for everybody else because then it makes it easier for me to hide from the work that I have to do.
Plus, that's the only way you were ever acknowledged as a human being, the attaboys.
Yes.
You don't, I still remember the look on my mother's face when I'd leave in the morning and we had to have the rent that night. At the time, $700 for a 12, 13-year-old kid was a lot of money.
Yes.
And I remember that's one of the reasons why I started committing crime. It wasn't because I was buying stuff for myself. I was pushed into drug abuse and a life of crime because of my household. I was a good kid.
Right.
I was a really good kid, and so it's interesting because my wife and I met when we were 15 and 16 years old. And I remember, the first time I saw her, I remember her standing in a group of girls. And I remember looking at her, and she was the most beautiful young woman I had ever seen, but part of that beauty was that there was a sadness about her. And I didn't know that her mother had just passed away. And she also was parentified, because when her mother passed away, her and her sister, mostly my wife, had to take up all of the work around the house. And in my culture, there was no appreciation. There was no thank you. It was just, it's an old school type of culture. And so she just felt it was never enough. And so one of the things that attracted us to each other is that I immediately started taking care of her, because that's what parentified kids do.
Right.
And so that's why I say that later on in life, when you get into relationships, we're fixers. If there's pressure, give it to me.
Yes.
I'm good. I can do that. And in doing that, I started to realize that now I have these gigantic expectations based on what I've done. It becomes this cobweb of a mess, this perfectly designed mess, and as I was thinking about a circus yesterday. Of all the things I was driving, I was thinking, like, when you go to a circus, it looks like everything's in disarray, but it's actually not. It's a very planned, coordinated, everybody's very skilled at what they do. They
Right.
just make it look that way. They make it look like everything's disorganized, but it's actually not.
Right.
And that's kind of what my life was, or the life of any other parentified kid. And I didn't know what was happening to me. This has caused a lot of stuff in my marriage. We've been married, we've been divorced twice and remarried a
Wow.
third time, and it's because of these issues. The love was always there. I just couldn't get right. I couldn't find my path. And I remember this last time that we got back together. I had just moved back into the place that we're living. There was some distance between my wife and I, because we were away for a year and a half, and we decided that we were going to get this thing done. Now we got 2 adult kids, and we're all sitting at the table. It was a very interesting conversation, because I was like, I want this thing to work, and my kids are at the table, because we talk with
Right.
our kids. They're adults now,
Right.
and they were in an interesting situation, because they're watching their mother and father reconcile for the third time, and God knows what they were thinking. And I was like, I want you guys to tell me what you guys are thinking. Like, this is us. This is our family. I'm sorry that it's not your normal everyday family, but you have seen how your mother and I have treated each other through the divorce. We were very, very civil, very, very reasonable, very supportive of each other, because we both knew our kids were watching. So we managed that beautifully. Money was never an issue. Whatever she needed, and she never asked for more than what she needed. I mean, she's just a beautiful human being all the way around, right? But I remember that night we had the discussion, and I still wasn't sleeping in the bed. I was on the sofa downstairs. My kids were in their room. My wife was in her bedroom, and I was sleeping downstairs, and I was like, what is wrong with me? Something is wrong with me. And I remember hitting my knees and just praying, saying, whatever power you are, whoever you are, can you just tell me what the fuck is wrong with me? I just can't get right. And I remember I took out my laptop and I started just searching. And somehow I landed on the page for parentification, parentified kids. And I started reading, and I just started weeping. I just started weeping. This is me.
Yeah.
This is me. And then I looked at the effects in adult relationships. This is me. And I ran upstairs, and I woke up my son, and I brought him down, and I said, read. And he goes, that's you. And I was so happy I found. It was very important to me to find out what was happening to me.
Yeah.
And then I just got to work.
There's relief in knowing that there's not this vague, damaged, defeated part of me that nobody knows anything about, including yourself. And same with addiction and alcoholism. When you relate, when somebody else talks about your mind,
It validates you.
it feels like there's so much relief that, oh my God, I'm not alone in
I'm
this.
not crazy.
And I'm not crazy.
Yeah, I'm
Other
not
people
crazy.
think this way or act this way.
And there's a reason why I'm this way.
Right.
The pieces finally came together, and it didn't make the work any easier.
Sure.
And I can't tell you that I've been perfect or anywhere near perfect. And I have a sense, and you can disagree if you want, because you're the professional. I don't think people like me ever get whole. I don't think we ever completely mend. I think the closest we get to mending is directly dependent upon how much we help people, but real help, not still acting out in saving people, because that's
Right.
going back to old programming. Today I can say that I have learned how to help people, and sometimes helping means to sit back and let people feel the pain that they need to feel, because pain is a great motivator for change.
Right. I don't think the goal is to become whole, right? To reach that, or not whole, but to kind of feel like now I'm complete.
What do you
Or
think it is? Tell me.
the goal is not to get to a point of I thought I was not mendable, but now I am. I'm well put together and I feel it. I don't think that's really the goal, because we never get there, because it's a daily reprieve. Every single day I show up to the best of my ability, some days far more than others. And same with the so-called normies, people that don't have severe mental health issues. There's no gaining that sense of completion. It's just my experience, and as it shows up, and I show up for it accordingly, right? It's a completely different perspective, and I think that's what kind of keeps us sometimes separate from just the general civilians, humanity, is this sense of there's something wrong, and we can work on it, and we can have fulfilling, meaningful lives, but that wrong piece will always be wrong.
Yeah. I miss my childhood. I wish I had one. It would have been really nice.
You know, Marianne Williamson, I don't know if you know who that is, talks about how she's an author, spiritual teacher. This reminded me what you said of missing that childhood. Is she said it's really sad, incredibly sad, when a child misses having a childhood. But it's equally as sad when an adult misses having experienced adulthood, what it really means to show up as a mature adult, which we see both.
Yeah. I don't think I missed the latter. I think I'm working on it. I think I'm doing a pretty good job. And I'm not trying to make this particular segment of our show about me, but I'd like to speak on things that I have some personal experience with. I just remember as a kid sitting there and watching Little House on the Prairie while the madness was going on behind me. And I would just focus in, because it was such a kind and loving, that show actually gave me my North Star. It showed me what a family should be like, the values, what a father should act like, what a mother should act like, how kids should act. And I know that, it was a show, but the thing about that show was that they dealt with real issues. They dealt with child molestation. They dealt with addiction.
Yes.
That show was way ahead of its time.
Yes.
Way ahead of its time. And although it was a Christian show, they didn't hammer Christianity. They mentioned it once in a great while. They attended church every Sunday, but it wasn't about that.
Right.
It was about a family who understood, who went through hardships, who had failed crops, they went through hardships, but they were always together. Yeah. And the thing was that they never lost their dignity. No matter what life threw at them, they were always dignified. They always knew right from wrong. And those basic things were things that were not instilled, that I had to search out on my own. And when you're out there searching, you're trying things, and some of the things that I tried were not very good for me, and so you have that yin and yang that live with you for the rest of your life. I mean, I got a good life. I'm not complaining about it, but what I'm trying to get at is for parents that are dealing with their kids who are addicts or alcoholics, you have to let their mistakes register as mistakes. We've talked about this many times. A mistake, it has two parts to it. The initial act that puts the thing in motion, and then the boomerang effect of it, which always comes back to the individual.
Right.
As a parent, if your child sets the thing in motion, but you intercept the consequence of it, then it doesn't register as a mistake.
Right.
And so you leave your kid in purgatory.
Hmm.
They are living in this la la land that I can do whatever I want and not have to deal with any of it. But that can't go on forever.
Right. It's not
And
sustainable.
yeah, and that is only sustainable in your home. So
Right.
once that kid leaves your home, he's going to have the same expectation of the world, but the world is not going to deliver that.
They're not as forgiving.
No, no, and that's where the harsh reality sets
That's right.
in.
And that's why
not
they're
prepared.
so unprepared.
Correct.
The ward. We were at the ward
Yeah.
at the same time. That sense of I don't know how to show up.
I don't know how to live.
Yeah.
I don't know how to
I
live.
don't know how to build relationships. I don't know how to show up and do things I don't feel like doing.
Mhm.
Right? There's nobody that's going to come save the day.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is my generation. We had bad days, we had bad luck. You know, life shows up for everybody, but we still went to work. We brushed our teeth. We did our laundry when we came home. It seems like nowadays, if everything doesn't go their way, the basics stop happening.
Yes. We were higher functioning because we were expected to be higher functioning.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's higher functioning. I mean, yeah, it is definitely by definition higher functioning, but we have to tell people to bathe today.
Right.
25, 26-year-olds, we have to tell them to bathe.
But that's the higher functioning piece.
It
that
is. Technically, you're
you
absolutely
take,
right.
at the very minimum.
But it's insulting almost. You're a full-fledged human being. Me taking a shower without somebody telling me to, I'm higher functioning? Are really? Like, I guess technically you're right. It is higher functioning, but it's almost insulting to say.
Yeah, and sometimes it helps, like you said, how I, as a therapist, I'm more direct and I'm more forward. I don't coddle. And I take pride in that because that's so rare.
Very
A lot
rare.
of times, if I tell you the thing that you need to hear, you're most likely not going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of therapists really stay in the story of every week, you talk in details about what happened and what it was like and how it made you feel. There's no real goal as far as, well, where do you see this yourself or this in 6 months? Where do you see this in 1 year? What do you hope to achieve? And what are we going to do to get there? Right? There's no real, there is no containment. It's just this sort of open-ended.
On-running, yeah.
We'll see how you feel when you feel that way, be it in 6 months, be it in 6 years. And so what I do is a lot of times I would point out that you think you need credit because you decided to get out of bed today. And that's really difficult to hear. And a lot of therapists wouldn't point that out. They would give you credit for trying and you're doing your best and that kind of thing. And I never wanted to be that therapist. I always said that I wanted to do what felt right for me. I don't want to say something because I should and because I'm afraid you're coming back or because you're cash pay or because of whatever, any of that. I want to do the work with dignity and with peace of mind, knowing that I said the thing that I needed to say. And not everybody gets that treatment. Sometimes I go a lot softer. And other times I really push hard. It depends on how I gauge the situation, how much you can really take.
Of course. And that comes from your training and your experience.
Yes.
And because some of our viewers and some of the comments we get, I want to make it perfectly clear because I already know who you are and what you're going to say. She's not saying that what happened didn't happen and it shouldn't be talked about. What Shirin is saying, yes, let's talk about it, let's acknowledge it, but let's not hang up curtains and call it home. Let's be on our way to somewhere else. So a lot of times when therapists like Shirin tell the truth because they actually care, she has nothing to gain by losing a client. She didn't go to school and has been doing this for years to show up and lose clients. But I will tell you one thing about Shirin. She's willing to lose a client for the client's benefit. She's not willing to keep a client and hurt their progress. So sometimes it takes somebody to tell you the truth and you go away mad, and then maybe a year or two down the line, when you hear the same truth again, because you're ready now,
Right.
you'll go back and go, oh, okay,
It
I understand
registers,
what
yeah.
she was trying to do.
Yes.
So yes, sometimes we pass the baton. You know, I can't help everybody. All we can do is plant some seeds and just water them,
Right.
and do what we can do. When they blossom and when they grow, it's not all up to us, the people that are doing help. Now, I'm not a therapist. You know, I'm not an LMFT. I don't have any type of license whatsoever. What I do have is 31 years of experience in recovery and a horrific childhood, and I've managed to find a way to connect with people on a level that only I can connect with certain people. Now, there's also people that I can't connect with.
Right.
So I'm not the be all end all, but I do have my own niche of what I do, and I really enjoy doing it. In fact, last week at Omnia, I told all my therapists, I said, you know, this week when you're working with your clients, let's not have the conversation be about their trauma. And you know, everybody's ears perked up. They're like, well, what do you want us to talk about? I said, just for this week, I want you to talk about all the people that our clients sent to therapy with their bullshit. Let's just take a look at that. Let's let them see the other side of the coin, right? Because your shenanigans have had effects on others. All we've been talking about is what people have done to you. But let's talk about what you've done to people now, because it'll actually help you. It'll give you the other side of the coin that will help balance things out. Because if you walk around thinking that you've done nothing to the world and the world has done everything to you, if you look at life through that lens, it's not a perception that's based in reality, because you won't be very forgiving towards people.
Yeah.
But when we document the things that you've done to people, you'll understand what forgiveness actually requires and means. So that approach that you have, I think, is spectacular. It's not popular, but you know, we're not doing this to be popular. We're doing this to help people.
And that's not to say, I mean, I have clients now that I've worked with for the past couple years, right? Because I feel that it's needed, and I feel that there's progress, not in the way that I think of, but still there's integrity around the work, and so it's taken however long it's taken. But there's a saying that you can only take them as far as you have gone yourself as the therapist. So, you know, I never ask a client to do anything I haven't been willing to do myself, right? I never try and preach or try and diagnose or tell you what I've read or what I've learned. It's based on my personal experience. If I don't feel like I've personally experienced it in some way, then I'm not your person, right? Because I think that's what makes the work really powerful, is that you know that what I'm saying is from a much deeper level than some training I did, you know? And so that's what, for me, makes it really effective, is that piece, which a lot of therapists don't. You know, it's
True.
very arm's length, that we take the boundaries piece to an unnecessary level in terms of, well, I can't tell you anything about me because this is all about you. And so self-disclosure is not necessary, but at least not directly.
But indirectly, it's at play
It
every
absolutely
day.
is at play, yes.
For sure. And those are two different, you know, styles of therapy that therapists, some do, you know, include self-disclosure, some don't. I don't think it's necessary,
Right.
but definitely indirectly it does come
Right.
through. I want to kick this thing into a whole different gear now, because let's say that you've come in and you've done the work and you understand what scrambled you. And you got some clarity, you got some tools, you understand that it will be a life's work. Okay, so we got that. From what I see, I still see people even though they've unscrambled themselves and they've done the work, there's still something missing in a human being.
Mm.
And I think there's this yearning as human beings, because we are beings.
Mm.
We are spiritual creatures. We're half spirit and half human. That's why we're called human beings. And I think that the being part of us has a yearning for a connection with whatever the source of life is.
Yes.
And I think that we try to achieve that connection through the physical realm, which the physical realm is it's limited. You know, when you hear about people, you know, oversexing or overusing drugs or over shopping, it is that yearning,
Yeah.
that spiritual yearning that is hitting a physical boundary. You know, you can have one woman, then you can have two women in your bed, and then five women, and then it's not enough. It's just not enough. No matter how much money you have, no matter how many pieces of jewelry you have, how much clothes you have, how many mansions you buy, how many cars you have, you still run into that ceiling that there's got to be something more. And I think that more is on a spiritual level.
Yes.
And I think people need to understand that if it was strictly connected to material level, then poor people could never achieve it.
Right.
And that's just not the case.
Right.
Because all mystics, all enlightened beings who have walked this planet never had anything.
Right.
They were always out in the desert. They were in the forests. Not because they didn't like people, but because they just wanted to connect with something much bigger than them.
Right.
So now we're talking about, we've cleared up the mess, we've untangled the tangled web. Now we know that we need to deepen spiritually. And that becomes a very, very private, intimate, personal endeavor. But we have to release the hostages to be able to do that. We got to release everybody. We got to let it all go.
Yeah.
All the people we harmed, all the people that harmed us, all this stuff, we got to let everybody out.
Yeah.
And once everybody's gone, we can begin that work. Let's talk a little bit about that.
And that happens through, forgiveness and cultivating compassion, which happens with therapy and with step work and mentorship and meetings, and it's a combination of things.
It's good to have a community of like-minded, like-hearted people.
It's an absolute necessity. It's not just good to have it, but we as human beings, we are wired for connection. If the connection is missing, then there's really no platform to build on.
Isn't there a duality there? And let me ask you this. We are wired, but we also are wired to have alone time. It is a balance. Community is absolutely essential. But you can watch people, they'll be at a party and they'll be around people and stuff, and then there'll come a time where like your internal clock and say, it's time to go home.
Yeah.
Because there's a time and place for it. In 12-step programs and in institutions like that, you go there, you hear things, you get ideas, and then you go privately and you practice them.
Right.
And you see if they fit. So community is 100% important, but so is your personal responsibility to your private time with the God of your understanding. I think they're equally important.
Absolutely. No, in community, we get to learn more about ourselves. That's how we know what we like or don't like. You see somebody that you just don't know why, but you just really like them, how they carry themselves, and there's something about them. That's because it's familiar, maybe in potential, but if it didn't resonate, then I wouldn't know what it is. And vice versa, if somebody really irritates me or angers me and I can't really pinpoint why, because they're revealing something to me about myself. So we need the other, meaning others, to learn more about ourselves.
So they're like soundboards.
Yes.
We bounce off each other in a spiritual type of
Yeah.
way. We begin to learn, we begin to do the work and grow in a spiritual realm, because to me, at almost 57 years old, that's the only the spiritual work that I'm doing today, I have to do it because it's checkmate. I've tried everything else.
Yeah.
Every move I make is checkmate. The spiritual realm is the only place left for me to go where I'm actually safe. I'm safe. I feel a connection with something so much bigger than what my mother or father could have ever given me.
But it took work to get there, and that's what people don't realize is they just see themselves as, well, yeah, I believe in God and I pray, but you know, the relationship is very mutual. Like any other relationship, the more time and effort you invest in the relationship, the stronger it gets. And the longer that you're in it and the more consistent that you're in it, right? So your God is that powerful to you. It's like just a working part of the mind. You don't have to think about God. God is always present, or your higher power. That's because it took a lot of work to get there. Whereas other people have to really remind themselves and tap into that state. And for you, it's second nature. But what you said about this, you know, somebody who comes in and they understand all the different aspects of what has them be, how they are. I think what I see in therapy a lot is a lot of that, where people have been in therapy for years and they have been in CBT and DBT type groups. They have a lot of knowledge about here's what's wrong, here's why it's wrong. They can probably tell me all about all the different modalities because they've been in groups for years or months, hearing about it. But what's missing, and they think, well, it doesn't work because I know all about it and my life is not getting better. But what's missing is the behavioral change. See, we think because I understand it and because I can tell you all the details about my background and how it led to my current diagnosis, then that should automatically relieve, right? Because I know what's wrong. I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I keep doing it. So there's something wrong with me. It's in the behavioral modification that the work really takes place. So I asked them, okay, so you know all about mindfulness, but when was the last time that you actually consistently applied all these tools? And more often than not, it's like, well, I did it for 3 days or maybe a week. It's not consistent. So I ask people, if you think something isn't working, be it therapy or any specific type of modality, look at your physical actual life.
What are you doing?
And really, try and unpack what does my typical day look like? All the tools, how am I applying them? In what specific situation did I pause and really take a look at, I want to say this, but let me go and tap into the work where I am going to respond rather than react or whatever it may be. That's not really happening.
No, and it's not happening. And I have to say this because this is one of the biggest things that I see in the work that I do. Most people do not experience life. They experience their psychological drama. Most people are wrapped up in their heads. You can have 100 people sitting in the room and each of them is in 100 different places. People don't understand the power of here and now. People are so lost in the past and in the future, and they're really suffering the two most fantastic gifts that human beings have: memory and imagination. They're suffering those two things because, and I'm not saying that memory is bad. Without memory, we couldn't survive.
Right.
Our five senses are outgoing senses, and we memorize things for survival. And it's not, but people are suffering things that happened 20 years ago, like if they're still happening. When you're suffering with something that isn't happening anymore, it's lunacy. There's no difference between you and a guy sitting on a bus thinking that there's snakes all over the place. He's responding to the snakes that aren't there, and you're responding to something that happened 20 years ago that isn't happening anymore. So just a practice of See, I said this to a woman once, and her problems, her fears of the future, and the stuff that happened in the past were so prevalent to her that they occupied every moment of her day. And I told her, I said, see, if I was to jump on top of you and begin to strangle you, strangle the breath, the life out of you, all of those things would go away because they're not real. The only thing that would be left that is real is your life.
Right.
All of a sudden, your life, your real life, would become so prevalent and important to you that you would do everything you can just to take one more breath. But the minute your life is not in danger, you're back to your psychological bullshit. You're stuck in your head. You're not even here.
Right.
Most people will not experience life until the moment before they die. And then when it's happening, they're bewildered.
With the people that are really in the past and struggling to, like the woman, in terms of trying to get them to see how irrelevant all of this is, and that there is a now and a now and a now after that. The body, the person that really thinks the snakes are coming after them, that's their actual belief. So even though there's nothing, the body doesn't know the difference.
It reacts.
So
It
if I'm, for
responds.
instance, terrified of flying and I have a flight tomorrow, I can be on this chair thinking about I'm probably going to die on the plane. These are the statistics in terms of how many people get hurt and all of that. The anxiety and the response of the body will be exactly the same as the one I would have on the plane tomorrow. The body doesn't know the difference. So even though it may be 10, 20 years after the traumatic event, living in it makes it seem very real, and the nervous system responds to it as if it is happening. Not that it was, time is not a tool, right? So just because time has passed doesn't heal. The work heals.
Correct.
And dismantling the pieces and putting them back together is what heals.
Time can actually entrench it even more if it's unworked on, right?
Right. If it's not resolved, then time really deeply even ingrains it into my system as to these are the reasons why I'm limited, right? And so it's not really the ironically the trauma is not the difficulty. Like you said, poor people can be happy. We don't need the stuff. It's not poverty, or it's not the accident, or that's inevitable, that life is going to happen, and accidents and difficult things.
Death is inevitable.
That's not what harms us. The harm comes because I don't have anywhere to take that to.
Correct.
So let's say I was abused or bullied or really hurt at school. As traumatic and as hurtful that was, the real pain that debilitates the mentally ill or the person that struggles with depression and anxiety is that I came home and there was no space and there was no one to take that to. And that's really what does the harm, It's that I didn't feel safe to talk about it. I didn't feel like anybody cared. I felt like I better keep quiet, or it's because it's going to be my fault anyway, or that I would get in trouble for it.
Correct.
So it's not the, finances, or it's not what happened and how terrible it was. It's that there's no place to take that. And I have to just deal with it on my own. And I have to just kind of push it down as it never happened. And nobody sees it. See, if you're a parent that's aware, you can see, like when I work with certain parents with children, 8, 10, and they say, well, I don't know why they just started acting out. I don't know why they're wetting their bed and all this stuff. And I said, just because I don't know why doesn't mean there's not a why.
There's absolutely a why.
There's always a reason.
Yeah.
I don't, and same with adults. We don't just act out in certain ways and be destructive and blow up our lives. There is a reason. And so when you ask, what is wrong with me? And if I can't come up with an answer because I'm loved and I have all of these things around me, so I can't understand it, I just assume, well, I'm crazy because I don't know why. Just because I cognitively can't
Connect the dots.
Right. I can't make sense of it. The nervous system The body is telling me that there's something seriously wrong
here.
and we dismiss it because, well, why? I'm supposed to be having fun. This is supposed to be the best day of my life. So the anxiety needs to just go away. We deny it and we absolutely dismiss it because it doesn't make sense.
But it won't go away.
It won't go away.
You can't dismiss it. And that's the thing about life, is that whatever it is that's knocking at your door, you have to answer the door.
And listen to the body. The body will tell you everything that you need to know.
Correct.
Not the mind, not the logical left brain part where it reasons. The right brain is really the part where I experience emotions rather than understand the logical aspects of it.
Correct. There's emotions. And then the oldest thing is when you tell the kid not to put his hand on a hot stove.
Mm-hmm.
The body will tell you vis-a-vis physical pain, move your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that people don't ignore because it's physical pain. But for some reason, emotional pain, people don't understand to obey that as they would as physical pain. So let's say that it's getting really interesting, this conversation, because let's say that I've gone into therapy, I've done the work, I have put all the pieces on the table, I see where they fit. I still need to be on my way somewhere else. As a human being, I have to be evolving all the time, because once you've figured that stuff out, if you don't continue to evolve, the mind will come up with more shit. The mind is a very funny thing, because its job is to create and solve problems. So one of the things that I've noticed is when we talk about I, who is I? Because that's a really important thing, I believe, as beings. And I always find it fascinating when I watch like a plane that has gone down. They don't ask how many people died. They ask how many souls were lost. I pay a lot of attention to the being part of human, because I know that I'm not my body. I know that for a fact, because this body was gathered over a period of time. I ate food and I grew. I didn't come this size.
Right.
It's something that I gathered. Also, all of my intelligence is something that I also gathered. My intellect, all the information, I wasn't born with it. Now, I have had some memory downloaded when I was born, like, I never met my great-great-great-great-grandfather, but his nose might be sitting on my face. That's evolutionary memory, right? So when we talk about I, who is I? If I'm not the body and I'm not all of the information that's in my head, who am I then? And I believe, and this is where it gets a little bit this way for people, I believe that I am a piece of creation. I believe that I am the energy that gives this body motion. I am the energy that supplies electricity to this being, this complex computer that a human is. And because it's so complex, I get to speak, I get to think, I know that I have consciousness, but I am not the mechanism itself. I am the thing that powers the mechanism. And that's where the spiritual aspect, because I don't think we talk enough about that. Once I got stuff cleaned up in my life, there was still something missing. And it was a union or a reunion. And what people call God, it's just a word, but what it actually means is the source of creation. When we talk about God, we're talking about the source of creation. Rumi said it best. He said, I am not a drop in the ocean. I am the entire ocean in a drop.
Right.
And I think we have forgotten who we really are. And I can tell you right now that if I wasn't married and didn't have the responsibilities that I have, I'd be in a forest somewhere right now, walking around, mad, speaking to myself, and just enjoying life that way. That's not what I can do right now. Maybe one day I'll be able to do that, but I don't believe that I ever die. I believe that I will disembody one day but I will still be there.
Mm-hmm.
I will have a sense that I'm still there.
Yeah.
And so that gets into a whole different
Yeah.
realm of thing. But I think that's the natural progression, and it has become only available to a few. No, I think it's available to all. I just think that we're so distracted with stuff. We're so distracted with stuff, and we're trying things that don't work and will never work and have never worked. You know, it's not like wealthy people don't commit suicide, you know, people with money, and it's not like super wealthy people on their deathbeds don't tell us the truth. I wasted my life. I wasted my life. I wasted my life. You know, I have been so fascinated with this stuff. I got involved with you know, picking up deceased people for a while. I've done hospice volunteering.
Wow.
I've been searching. I've been so deep into this work, and that's what gives me my range. That's why I'm able to reach people. That's why I get, you know, to do recovery coaching. And you know, I'm with a client right now. We're in the last month of it, and it's all of these things that we talked about today, the different stages of a human being evolving. Of course, we would like everyone to have a wonderful childhood and evolve naturally, but it doesn't work that way. But after we clean up the stuff from the past and get some clarity as to who did what to whom, and the fact that we're all guilty and we're all innocent simultaneously, and we release all the hostages, we can get to work on expansion. It's not that I want more. I want it all, but on a spiritual level. And service has been the gateway for me. The best way for me to get out of myself is to help somebody else.
Yes.
You know, and unfortunately or fortunately, life doesn't give you a complete plan for you to see right now. As you step, it unfolds. There's a lot of trust that needs to go into, you know, life has been around forever. For as long as we know existence has been here, human beings haven't been here forever, but we have evolved over millions of years to have this complex instrument. And we're not using it to its full capacity. We have to connect with something other than material, and it's of the spiritual realm.
Yes.
And we have to go in. In is the only way out. It truly, truly is. And I wish they would teach this in school. I wish
Yes.
they would have kids meditate in the morning at school as young as 2, 3 years old. Then you wouldn't have to worry about bullying. You wouldn't have to worry about all this stuff. You know, I'd do
That's a good
things
point.
differently if
Yeah.
I was in charge, but I'm not, and I'm just going to continue to do what I do. I really admire the work that you do and the way
Thank
that
you.
you do it. I admire the fact that you'd rather have a few and really help them than to have, you know, many and not be able to reach them at all. It's not
Yeah.
in the numbers, it's in the effectiveness.
But in the same way you talked about spirituality, I have that sense too that, you know, whoever I'm meant to work with and I'm meant to share this journey with will appear. I don't have to promote, and I don't have to go
No.
out and try and get them. They will show up.
What you seek will seek you.
Mm-hmm.
There's no question about that. It's how the universe works. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful process when you just step away from it and just let it do what it does.
Yes.
Just let it do what it does. A great man once said, life is a tsunami. You either get to learn how to ride it or you're going to get crushed by it. Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's Interfere with me, Eric Evans. I hope that the information has been helpful for you. I know that it makes me feel wonderful to share it with you because we have lives at stake here. So please, if you liked it, if you enjoyed the information, and if you want more, please click on the like, subscribe, share it with your friends, share it with your family. I want to keep it coming because we got a lot of work to do.